Thank you, Luke, for reading that for us. Well, good evening, everyone. If I haven't met you before, my name is Nigel. I'm the night church minister here at Crosslight, and it's my joy to open up God's words this evening because utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Well, that's uplifting, isn't it? Welcome to church, everyone. Your life is meaningless. You're feeling encouraged and lifted up. That's what we come to church for, isn't it? Most of us, I imagine, turn up to church hoping that it's going to help us feel a little bit better about life. Maybe we'll hear something encouraging and comforting and, we'll have some nice conversations, we'll have a bit of food, we'll sing some songs, it'll be lovely. But not this week. No. Meaningless, everything is meaningless. It doesn't sound like what you hear in most parts of the Bible. If you would open up your Bible to any other part, it's pretty bleak. It's a little pessimistic, isn't it? A little bit negative. So the book of Ecclesiastes has developed a bit of a reputation for some people of being difficult and confusing, a little discouraging, overly negative. And we're going to spend the next 10 weeks looking at it. So there you go. I think you could be forgiven for feeling a little anxious, maybe a little doubtful from the introduction to this book that we have just read. But tonight, we are dipping our toes into Ecclesiastes and kicking off our series for 10 weeks in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I want to encourage you not to be discouraged, or at least not yet. Don't be skeptical about this book from what we have just read. I want to encourage you to be open-minded and to come with us on the journey over the next 10 weeks in this often misunderstood part of God's Word. And I want you to come with us on the journey because Ecclesiastes is going to examine life. It's going to interrogate what life is. It's going to go to some dark places, which I want to say is part of the process of arriving at what are some fundamental conclusions about life and God and the world and how we should live. So Ecclesiastes is going to be big. It's going to be hard at times, but I think it's going to be so good as well. I think in 10 weeks' time, we will be equipped with a wiser, more robust, and more livable view of God and the world and our lives. So today, as we start that journey, we are starting with the fundamentals of what is this book. What is Ecclesiastes? And if you have a look down at verse 1, it says this, right at the introduction of the book. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Or in verse 12, it says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. So what we have are the words of a teacher. And this teacher is traditionally seen as being King Solomon, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, who was wise, who was rich and powerful. And there are a couple of references to the reign of this teacher throughout the book. And so on the surface, it seems quite reasonable to think that the author was maybe Solomon. And yet, over time, there have been lots of other Old Testament scholars and language experts who've raised the possibility that maybe these are actually later words of a later editor or author, so not Solomon, but someone who's perhaps collected wisdom from Solomon, or even written in the tradition of Solomon, or even possibly using the figure of Solomon as a bit of a literary technique, a rhetorical device. Let me kind of pretend to be Solomon for a few minutes as we think about some wisdom. Now, I'm not going to get into all the technical reasons as to kind of how that debate goes and whether people think it's Solomon or not. If you want to ask me later, you can. But either way, whether it's Solomon or a later writer, what we're given is wisdom from a teacher who has undertaken much study. We're told in verse 12, he's undertaken much study, has applied themselves to obtaining wisdom and to sharing it with us. Now, a little side note here is that the word teacher here, the Hebrew word that we have translated as teacher, is that word kohelet, which actually doesn't really mean teacher. It's more like someone who gathers people to learn, someone who gathers an assembly for them to learn and consider things together. And then the Greek word for that is, for the assembly, the one who assembles and meets with people, is the Ecclesiastes. So hence why our book is called Ecclesiastes. We are gathering with the teacher to consider some big questions about life. But for the purposes of simplicity, I'm going to refer to him as the teacher. And the wisdom that the teacher has gathered for us to consider is all about one question. What is life? Well, he puts it this way in verse 3. What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? What we're going to see today and over the next few weeks is the teacher in Ecclesiastes has examined life under the sun. He's looked at all the things that humans do, the things we occupy ourselves with, the things we build our lives around, and he's prodding us to consider, what do you gain from it all? What's the benefit of the things we fill our lives with? What's the value of our work and our relationships, our desires, the dreams that we strive for? What is the point of life? What is there to be gained? But that question actually has a really particular focus that's important for us to note, because he's asking the question, what do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? This is a phrase that's going to come up again and again throughout Ecclesiastes, and we see it again in verse 14. I have seen all that things have been done. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. And what that means is he's examining life on this earth, not in the heavens. Right? He's not thinking about life with God. In some sense, he's taking God out of the picture and looking at life here, right now, under the sun that we live underneath. You see, most parts of the Bible are actually kind of doing the opposite of that. We tend to live our lives so consumed with the things that we can see and feel and touch, all the things of our day-to-day lives. And most of the Bible is trying to get us to lift our eyes and draw back the curtain and consider God. Give us glimpses of God or the spiritual or the eternal. The Bible, largely speaking, wants us to look to God and get his perspective. But Ecclesiastes is doing the opposite to that. The teacher is saying, okay, well, for argument's sake, let's take God out of the picture. And then let's take a look around us. Let's consider life in this world. Let's focus on the here and the now, everything about this life under the sun. And as we do it, we're going to ask ourselves, what's it all about? What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil here in this life under the sun? And so as we step through tonight and in coming weeks, we step through his argument and his conclusions, we need to remember that framing. If we were to try and understand our existence without God in the picture, what would that mean? What would we say about life in this world? And so the first thing that our teacher does in trying to answer this question is consider, what are humans? What are we? And he begins to answer that question by comparing us to the natural world around us. So if you have a look down at verses 4 to 6, he says this: generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south, the wind blows to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. The first realization or conclusion, the first lesson for us to consider is that you and I are oh so temporary. Generations come and then they go. Here 1 second, gone the next. But the earth remains forever. Now, if you're a stickler for the facts, you might be thinking, oh, well, the earth isn't going to last forever. One day our sun's going to burn out and then the whole earth and our whole solar system is going to collapse and die. The earth isn't forever. What's he talking about? That's not the point. When comparing you and I, compare our lives to the life of the earth, it's essentially nothingness and forever. And the point the teacher is making here is that we are just so temporary, so cosmically insignificant. We come and we go, and very little, if anything, has changed, and the world just keeps on spinning. The sun rises, it sets, and it does it all over again. The wind blows here, the wind blows there. It'll do it all again long after you and I are gone. Interestingly, this isn't just in Ecclesiastes. This pops up in the New Testament in the book of James, where James poses the question, what is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. So then if part of the reality of life under the sun is that we just are so short-lived, we're so temporary, things will roll on long after we are gone, well, the question still stands, well, what gain is there then? What gain is there in our short lives under the sun? What can we gain? And what the teacher does at this point is he touches on a few different possible answers that people might give. A few different things someone might look to as gain in their lives. Things where they might find meaning or purpose. And he touches on 4 things. And he's going to unpack each of these in greater depth as he continues going on through the book. But we're just going to consider tonight just his initial argument on these four things: on satisfaction, significance, status, and Sophia. If you're confused about the last one, we'll get to it. So the first of the things he looks at for us to consider is satisfaction. And he says about this in verse 8, "The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing." You see, in this life, under the sun, on this planet, there are all sorts of wonders and delights, aren't there? Sights and sounds and smells and experiences that capture us, that bring us joy, that are wonderful. And yet the teacher reflects that we will never quite have our fill. The eye always wants to see more. The ear always wants to hear more. And I think this is just so true. Some of you know that I love Indian food, and so Bombay Grill up the road gets a little bit of a workout from the Cowell household. But I can tell you that if I eat a delicious butter chicken or lamb korma or a vegetarian samosa, I delight in it. I love it. As I'm eating it, lovely. One of my favorite. I could eat Indian for the rest of my life and that'd be fine. You know what I've never done? I've never turned around after an Indian meal and gone, you know what, that was so good, I never have to eat Indian again. Right? It's so good that what do I want? Oh, I'm going to want it again. I can tell you that the next time I forget to bring lunch into the office, I'll be wandering up the road and getting a chicken tikka roll for lunch. Right? If we're looking for satisfaction and pleasure in this life, the teacher is saying to us here that we'll never actually be satisfied. The hedonist says to just enjoy life, seek pleasure, seek satisfaction. But the teacher is challenging us that the eye never has enough of seeing, the ear never its fill of hearing. So he turns his attention to another avenue of searching for meaning in this life under the sun, that is significance. To live a life of significance. I think this is what a lot of people look to and put their hope in our modern world, especially people who've come to that previous conclusion that life isn't about pleasure and satisfaction, that there needs to be something more to life, and so they think, well, we will live lives of significance. We'll make a difference in the world. We'll change the world, make it a better place. What does the teacher have to say to that? Have a look at verses 9 and 10. He says, "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was already here. It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time." So the teacher is putting for us to consider again that all of the accomplishments of your life, all the things that you might seek to achieve and do something significant, all the things that you might give to the world around you, he says, insignificant. There's nothing new under the sun. Now, some of you might say, hang on, the iPhone 17 just came out. What are you talking about? There's new things all the time. Look at the iPhone and all its awesome new features and capabilities. Humans doing new and amazing things all the time. What's he talking about? But I think the teacher's getting at the idea that even as you think about technological advancement, has much changed at all? I mean, social media, has it made us any more social? Has it made us any more connected? Has it improved human communication? Or are humans just as tribal and divided and hateful as we've always been? Or think about the car. Oh, what an invention. A master of engineering. We can get places faster and cheaper and more safely. So that must mean we've all got tons of free time and the busyness of life has been solved, right? No. Technology might change. We might feel like we are doing good things or creating new things, but ultimately, will anything really have changed about human existence and our life under the sun? The vast majority of us, when we think about it, any way you cut it, if you're examining life under the sun, without God in the picture, most of us live lives that are outrageously insignificant. And even if we do manage to achieve something valuable that affects the lives of other people in some good and desirable way, well, then the teacher would say, well, remember how temporary you are and how insignificant that change is in the timeline of history. And so it follows, he says, that the search for finding meaning and purpose isn't in significance. So he turns to the next avenue, perhaps status. That is what other people think of me or remember me for. And so he says this in verse 11. No one remembers the former generations. And even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Now, I want to do a little bit of an experiment here, and I want to raise you to raise your hand if you know your great-grandparents' names. A great-grandparent's name. All right, let's make it a little bit harder. What about great-great-grandparents? Great-great-great-grandparents? All right, one, maybe two, right? Isn't that interesting? Your great-great-great-grandparents were only 125 years ago. And yet, one, maybe two people in the room know who their great-great-great-grandparents were. They were your family. The reality is, the teacher is hitting us in the face with our own insignificance by facing up to the fact that given enough time, no one will remember us. No one will know who you were, or how you lived, or what you achieved. Any status or reputation we might have toiled long and hard for and earned for ourselves, he says, in the long run, is ultimately and utterly meaningless. Like us, it's here today and gone tomorrow. So where can meaning and purpose ultimately be found? He's saying not in satisfaction, not in significance, not in status. But he's got one more area to consider in this chapter. One more pursuit in which someone might seek meaning and purpose. And that is the pursuit of Sophia, which you might be confused by, but I had, satisfaction, significance, and status, and so I needed a fourth S, and the fourth one is wisdom, but that's not an S, and so I had to use the Greek word for wisdom, which is Sophia, so I'm sorry, I was a little bit pretentious, but let me have it. I needed my fourth S, all right? So Sophia, which is wisdom. Now, as we come to this one, bear in mind that our author is either Solomon himself or someone building on the wisdom tradition of Solomon, and yet the teacher says the pursuit of wisdom itself is meaningless. Have a look at verses 16 to 18. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. With more knowledge, the more grief. Our teacher has applied himself to obtaining wisdom and knowledge about the world, which sounds like a very noble and high-minded thing to do. I think we respect intellectuals who study the world and are experts in their field. He sought to study life. He sought to understand life. And yet his conclusion is that even that itself is like chasing after the wind. Have any of you ever tried to catch the wind? Just gone outside and run, yeah, I'll get it, and then got it? No, it's pointless, isn't it? It'd be meaningless to try and catch the wind. And he says that living for wisdom and knowledge itself is meaningless because with wisdom comes much sorrow and with more knowledge comes more grief. Like before tonight, I would guess most of you had considered for a while that in 125 years no one's going to remember you. And that's true, but it's a little sobering, isn't it? It's not exactly a joyful thought. The reality is that being more informed about the world and what's going on sometimes doesn't actually contribute that positively to our lives. An ever-increasing knowledge of the world often just draws us into an awareness of all the problems in the world that we can't fix. I sometimes find watching the news painful. You see all these ways in which the world and people's lives are so broken, and I'm powerless to do anything about it a lot of the time. And so the teacher is saying that even trying to be wise by opening your eyes to reality brings sorrow and grief as you're forced to confront the realities of life under the sun. You feeling heavy yet? It's okay if you are, because in fact the teacher is too. Have a look at his conclusion in verses 13 and 14, where he says that he's applied my mind to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens, and what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, and all of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. When life under the sun is examined and considered, he says it's meaningless. Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I actually want to pause for a second on that word that we have translated there as meaningless, because it comes from the Hebrew word hevel, which literally means mist or vapor or a smoke. It's the kind of idea that it's something that's there for a second but gone the next. Something that might look solid in the moment, but try to grasp onto it, try to hold onto it, and it's gone. And so this is important because what the teacher is saying is not that life has no meaning, but that the meaning in life without God in the picture is like smoke. It's deceptive. It's things like satisfaction or significance or status. They might seem like something you can build your life on. They might seem solid and like you can grasp onto them, but when you look closely, when you try, the teacher is saying they're substanceless. They'll just slip through your fingers. And so that's important to note because he's not saying that these things have no value whatsoever. He's just saying they're not the firm foundation for life. And yet, he's going to conclude, what else is there in this life under the sun? Where else could we look if we were searching for meaning and purpose in life under the sun? At this point in Ecclesiastes, he doesn't have an answer for us, and so he reflects on what a heavy burden this realization is. And so if you are feeling like this has been heavy so far, that's okay. It has been heavy. It's meant to be heavy. We're meant to feel that. And the teacher is right there with you. What a heavy burden to consider and confront what it is that we gain from all the labours at which we toil under the sun. But I also want to remind you, we're only in chapter 1. Recently, I was watching the World Athletics Championships in Tokyo, and I was watching the 5,000 metre races. And what was interesting was that in the first lap of the race, the commentators didn't really seem to care where anyone was positioned in the race. Like the person who would often end up winning the race was probably back in like 5th or 6th or 7th, because they still had 7.5 laps around the track to jostle and manoeuvre and to gain their position before the end of the race. And so I want to put to you that when it comes to Ecclesiastes, we are just on that first lap of a 5,000 metre race. Things might look and feel a certain way now, but I want to encourage you to stick with it, to stick with the teacher on this journey, because where he started in chapter 1 is not where he finishes. He's going to take us on the journey of peeling back the layers of life and considering it and examining life, and it's going to be painful at times, but where we've started is not where he's going to finish. But also, that's not where I want us to finish tonight either. I want to finish by taking us to the greater teacher. The teacher in Ecclesiastes, wonderful teacher, wisdom to share with us. And yet the greatest teacher was Jesus. And so have a look with me at these words from Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Jesus said, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." These are the final words from Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. And in them, I think he's addressing a similar sort of question to what we're thinking about in Ecclesiastes. It's a question about what's the foundation of life. Our teacher in Ecclesiastes has been asking, what do we gain from life under the sun? What is it that we should build our lives on? And Jesus is speaking to this. And to put words into the mouth of the teacher, all the things he's raised are like shifting sand. If we try to build our lives on satisfaction or significance or status or Sophia, he'd say that they're shifting sand. They are without substance. They'll fall, they'll collapse, they'll leave your life in ruin. And yet here in these words, Jesus gives us an alternative, doesn't he? See, where the teacher has been searching for something solid to hold on to, Jesus gives it to us. He says, "Whoever hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And that house did not fall. In all the storms of life, that house stood." And it's interesting that the house didn't not fall because of how good a house it was. The house didn't not fall because of how beautiful a house it was, or who built it, or how many other people were impressed by the house or remembered the house. Now, the house stood the storms of life because it had its foundation on the rock. And that rock, we know, is Jesus. We heard throughout our John series in recent weeks that he's the light of life, that he's the source of living water, the one who gives eternal life, that life is found in him. And the teacher in Ecclesiastes has shown us that we live in a world where everything else is moving sand. It's like smoke through your fingers. And so Jesus calls to us. He speaks into that question and he calls us and he says, come and build your life on me. I'm solid. I'm the firm foundation. Build your life on me and my words, and your life will never fail. You will never fall. And so if you're a normal human being who is tempted to build your life on any of the things that the teacher has been examining, can I say to you tonight, don't do it. Don't build your life on a quest for satisfaction and pleasure. Don't build your life hoping to do and be something significant. Don't chase after status and reputation. Don't even rely on being wise and knowledgeable. In the coming weeks, we're going to spend some time diving into each of those in a little bit more depth, actually. But right up front, the teacher and Jesus are putting to us that ultimately there is nothing to be gained in those things. They are mist and vapour. Build your life on Jesus. He is where there is great gain. He is the rock to build our lives on. Follow him. Listen to him. Put his words into practice in your life. He is the solid foundation that we can hold on to. Amen.